Minho was a man carved from granite. His face rarely betrayed emotion, and his movements were always measured and economical. He didn't simply lead his organization, he was its core, its unshakable center. Everyone in his inner circle underwent a rigorous selection process. He didn't trust intuition, he trusted facts. And for years, facts had convinced him of the reliability of his people. These weren't just hired hands, they were extensions of his will, his calculating mind. Without a second thought, he entrusted them with suitcases of cash, confidential documents, the keys to his darkest secrets. His trust wasn't an emotion, but an investment, and he meticulously monitored its return. Among this select circle was Jiyu. From the start, she seemed ideal. Her first test was a lie detector. The questions were tricky, aimed at revealing the slightest vulnerability, self-interest, and hidden motives. The needles on the device traced smooth lines. She passed. But Minho didn't limit himself to one test. He administered several more, spreading them out over time. He sent someone to her, offering a large sum for some insignificant information about her boss. She refused, reporting an attempted bribery. He monitored her daily life, her spending, her circle of friends. Nothing superfluous, not a hint of weakness. Jiyu passed all these tests flawlessly, but not because she was pure of heart, but because she was smart. She had known about these tests from day one. Her job was a long-term game. She hadn't joined the organization for the paycheck, she had come for the opportunity. Her loyalty was a carefully constructed mask she donned every morning. At first, she earned his trust with small tasks, which she carried out flawlessly. Then she took on more risky assignments, demonstrating composure and resourcefulness. She became his shadow, his right hand, the key to his safes. But a bomb was ticking inside her. Jiyu belonged to that breed of person for whom stability was tantamount to death. She constantly needed upward mobility, a new challenge, a new peak. A good salary, a luxurious apartment, expensive clothes. All of it quickly turned into a gilded cage for her. She became bored. She felt she was capable of more, that her intelligence, her access to Minho's resources, were merely tools for something grander. And this something gradually began to take shape in her mind. She watched Minho, studying his methods, his confidence, his absolute power. And she realized that in another body, in another form, she was his exact copy. She could make decisions with the same coldness, the same insight into people's weaknesses, the same skill at manipulation. She knew all his operations, all his secret passages. And she understood the most important thing. Her strength lay in the absolute trust she had created. She could take anything, and no one would even raise an eyebrow. Everyone would assume it was the right thing to do, that it was an order from the boss, transmitted through his top assistant. Her power was invisible, but no less real for that. The idea had been brewing for months. The plan was as simple as a dagger strike and just as effective. She decided to take all the cash from Minho's main safe. It was an astronomical sum, stored in bundles of bills. But simply stealing them would be foolish. The loss would be noticed immediately. So her plan was a gradual replacement. She would swap the real money for high-quality counterfeits, one bundle at a time. The safe was rarely opened completely. Minho usually took 1 or 2 bundles for operational expenses. The risk was minimal. Minho's organization had an old score to settle. It was her small revenge, a subtle touch. She used her boss's resources to find someone who would help her rob him. She worked slowly, methodically. Once a week, sometimes less often, she removed a wad of cash from the safe and replaced it with an identical wad of counterfeits. She hid the real money in a secret place in her home. Her getaway suitcase was already waiting for its moment. With every step, she felt her goal drawing closer. Adrenaline was addictive, sweeter than any praise from Minho. She watched him, completely unsuspecting, open the safe, take the stack of notes without even looking at it, and place it in his own. Safe. She saw how his trust in her, the most precious thing she had, became a noose around her neck, and it amused her. And then came the day when there was only 1 wad of real money left in the safe. Fate seemed to be on her side. Minho had just left for an important meeting in another city for half a day. She had plenty of time to complete her grand stunt. Entering his office, she paused for a moment at the massive desk. She ran her fingers over the polished surface, recalling the thousands of hours spent there. No nostalgia, only a cold satisfaction. She approached the safe. She knew the combination by heart. A click, a turn of the handle, and the heavy door slid open. Inside lay the last stack. the very one that separated her from a new life. She pulled it out. The paper was rough, thick. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling the scent of money, the scent of power, freedom, and betrayal. Then, with a swift, practiced movement, she placed the bundle in her leather bag. From an inside pocket, she pulled out the last bundle of counterfeits, a perfect match for the one just lying in the safe, and replaced it. She closed the door and turned the handle. It was over. As she descended the stairs, she encountered one of the guards. She smiled at him, a light, casual smile. "I think I'm getting sick," she said, coughing slightly for emphasis. "My temperature's rising. I'll take a couple of days off work. Please warn everyone." The guard nodded, wishing her a speedy recovery. It was the perfect alibi. Her absence for the next few days would not arouse suspicion. By the time Minho opened the safe and realized what had happened, she would already be on the other side of the world, where no one would ever find her. Her plan was flawless. Minho entered his office. The quiet, cool air greeted him with its familiar, sterile cleanliness. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting gentle streaks across the perfectly polished surface of his desk. Everything here exuded order and control, the two pillars on which he had built his empire. He removed his jacket, hung it neatly over the back of his chair, and sat down. His movements were measured, devoid of fuss. He was calm. Absolutely. He made several phone calls. His voice was even, commanding, every word measured and precise. He didn't ask, he set goals. He didn't persuade, he stated. He was currently negotiating the purchase of a new building for yet another business project. His organization was growing, expanding, and this move was logical and well thought out. The partner on the other end of the line was clarifying something, and Minho, without changing his tone, countered his doubts with the iron logic of numbers and profit. Everything was as always, efficient, cold, and emotionless. The idea of installing hidden cameras in his office had crossed his mind more than once, especially recently when the scale of his operations had grown and the flow of confidential information had doubled. But each time, he dismissed the idea. It would be a sign of weakness, a sign that he didn't fully trust his inner circle. And trust, built over years, was his greatest asset. It was stronger than steel. Now, looking at the closed safe door, he mentally congratulated himself on his decision. Why would he need cameras if he could read people like open books? If he'd spent years testing their mettle and never made a mistake? He ended the conversation, promising to send the documents within an hour. The partner was satisfied. Minho leaned back in his chair. The job was done. All that remained was a formality, taking the money from the safe for the first tranche, the usual routine. He rolled his massive leather chair smoothly toward the safe. The solid metal door seemed the epitome of reliability. He reached for the combination. His fingers memorized the complex sequence of numbers. A click, a soft, barely audible sound of the turning mechanism, and the heavy door slid silently aside. Inside, neatly stacked, lay the money, wads of tightly packed bills. He looked at them without much interest. For him, they weren't a symbol of wealth, but simply a tool. A tool for deals, for influence, for problem solving. He mentally praised Gia. Everything was in perfect order, each wad in its place. She was a model assistant. He had no idea that at that very moment, his real money, the one that should have been lying before him, was already far away. It wasn't simply crossing the border in his assistant's bag. It was already changing hands. It was turning into plane tickets, into keys to a new home, into a new identity for the one he trusted implicitly. He trusted her with his life, his secrets, the keys to his darkest mysteries. He trusted her with almost everything he had. And this almost everything was now slipping from his hands. And he, completely blind and self-assured, stared at a pile of useless, artfully crafted paper. He didn't check the bills. Why? He never checked. The safe was his fortress, and GU its faithful guardian. He took several bundles, just enough for the transaction. The paper was slightly rough to the touch and smelled of printer's ink. Nothing aroused the slightest suspicion. The weight was correct, the packaging perfect. He put the money in. He pulled out his briefcase and clicked the locks. The sound was firm, decisive. He pushed the chair back into place and stood up. His gaze fell on Gia's empty desk. He remembered that she had taken sick leave. A fleeting thought flashed through his mind. I'll have to find out how she's feeling. It was a fleeting, purely formal concern for a valuable employee. No anxiety, No premonition of trouble. He left the office, clutching a briefcase stuffed with counterfeits. He was certain he was carrying real power, real authority. He was on his way to a meeting that was supposed to strengthen his position, but in reality, it was leading him to the brink of ruin. And all this time, his face remained perfectly calm, impenetrable, while his empire was quietly crumbling at the seams due to the betrayal of its most trusted confidant. He, its boss, continued to conduct business as usual. The irony would have been bitter if he had known it, but he didn't. Absolutely not. The meeting was scheduled at their usual restaurant, quiet, expensive, with darkened windows and tables arranged to ensure complete privacy. Minho arrived first. He sat in his usual corner chair, his back to the wall from where he could see the entire room, entrance, and exit. Habit, always in control of the space. His partner, a man named So-hyun, arrived precisely at the appointed time. He was dressed in a formal suit, his face a business-like composure. They exchanged brief, almost imperceptible nods. No unnecessary smiles, no handshakes. The language here was one of money and power, not social convention. The waiter, familiar with their habits, silently brought 2 glasses of water and left. The conversation began immediately, without preamble. They discussed the details of the deal, the figures, the deadlines. Minho said little, mostly listening, his gaze fixed on Seo-hyun's face, searching for the slightest sign of uncertainty or deception. But there were none. His partner was as collected and cool as he was. Everything was going according to plan. Perfectly, like a well-oiled clock. Minho felt a slight sense of satisfaction. One more step, and his influence would strengthen even further. He pulled a folded envelope of documents from his inside jacket pocket and placed it on the table. Seo-hyun glanced at them and nodded. Then came the key moment. Minho opened his briefcase, which sat on an empty chair nearby, and pulled out a thick, sturdy envelope. It was heavy. The weight of real money always felt special, palpable. He placed it on the table and, with a gentle flick of his wrist, pushed it toward Seo-hyun. He took the envelope. He didn't even look inside. He didn't count the bills, didn't hold them up to the light. Why? This was Minho. His word was ironclad, his reputation impeccable. The trust between them was as valuable as the money in that envelope. "I'm glad everyone was happy," Seo-hyun said, tucking the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket. His voice was even, emotionless. "Unfortunately, I can't stay. I have another business meeting in half an hour on the other side of town." Minho nodded. He understood. In their world, time was a currency, perhaps even more valuable than money. They stood up simultaneously. Another short, almost military nod, and Seo-hyun was already heading for the exit, his figure disappearing through the restaurant door. Seo-hyun left the restaurant feeling completely satisfied. The meeting with Minho had gone perfectly. The envelope with the money lay in the inside pocket of his jacket, pleasantly heavy and tactile. He got into his car and leaned back in the leather seat. Today was a special day, his daughter's birthday. He'd been eyeing a gift for her for a long time, an elegant gold chain from a small but renowned jewelry store. His daughter had once shown him a photo, and he remembered the delight in her eyes. Now was the perfect time to buy her a gift. He ordered the driver to the jewelry store. On the way, he pulled out an envelope tied with a silk ribbon. He didn't open it. Why? It was a settlement with Minho, a man whose word was law. The trust between them was the foundation on which their business was built. He felt confident. Everything was under control. The car stopped. The store looked just as he'd expected. Expensive, discreet. Gold and silver jewelry gleamed behind the glass display case. The same chain was still in place. Seo-hyun stepped inside. The store smelled of expensive wood and leather. The salesperson, an elderly man with impeccable manners, immediately approached him. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "I need this chain," So-hyun said, pointing to the display case. "Excellent choice." The salesman carefully removed the jewelry. "Masterwork." Seo-hyun nodded and pulled out an envelope. He untied the ribbon and pulled out a few of the top bills. They were new and crisp. He handed them to the clerk. The clerk smiled politely and took the bills. His fingers, accustomed to handling money, paused for a moment. A faint shadow crossed his face. He looked closely at one of the bills, then at the second. His smile faded. "Excuse me, sir." His voice became dry and formal. "But I cannot accept this payment." Seo-hyun frowned. He didn't understand. What's the problem? He asked, feeling irritation rising within him. This money. The seller carefully placed the bills on the counter as if they were dirty. They're counterfeit. The word hung in the air like a heavy, unreal weight. Seo-hyun couldn't believe his ears. Fake? Money from Miho. It was impossible. Absurd. What? His voice was sharp. Repeat that. They're counterfeit, the salesman said, his gaze fixed on you. He was frightened, but he stood his ground. The paper is wrong. There are no watermarks. I'll be forced to report you for attempted counterfeiting if you don't leave the store immediately. Seo-hyun felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at the money lying on the counter, the same money Miho had just handed him. His partner, the man whose word meant more than any seal. Anger began to boil within him, slow and venomous. This wasn't just a lie. This was humiliation, a slap in the face. Did Miho think he was stupid? That he wouldn't check? That he would swallow this insult? He silently collected the bills from the counter. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from rage. He stuffed the money back into the envelope, his movements jerky and abrupt. He didn't look at the clerk. He saw only Minho's face. His calm, confident expression as he handed him the envelope. He walked out of the store, slamming the door. Anger choked him. He got into his car, his mind racing. Why? Why had Miho done this? To test him? To humiliate him? Or was this some complicated game he wasn't privy to? But no, this was simpler. It was a direct insult. Contempt. He pulled out his phone, his fingers pressed hard on the numbers. He heard the dial tone. Each ring felt like a hammer blow on the anvil of his patience. Finally, a voice came on the other end of the line. Calm, collected. Hello, Seo-hyun. Is something wrong? Minho's voice was so ordinary, so normal. It exploded inside Seo-hyun. What happened? His voice was low, hissing with anger. I was just trying to buy a gift for my daughter with the money you gave me. You know what they told me? That it was counterfeit? Fake. He almost shouted into the phone. A deathly silence fell over the car. The driver froze, afraid to move. Are you making fun of me, Miho? Seo-hyun continued, his words falling like stones. Do you think I'll let you humiliate me like that? Do you think I'm someone you can fool with colored bills? You don't respect me, and you'll regret it. Someone today will deeply regret ever daring to hand me those counterfeit bills. He didn't give Miho a chance to say a word. He ended the conversation by slumping back in his seat, his heart pounding. Miho froze, holding the phone. Seo-hyun's angry words continued to burn in his ears like a hot iron. Fake! Fake! He slowly lowered the receiver, his fingers gripping the device so tightly the plastic cracked. For the first time in years, he felt not rage but complete, deafening bewilderment. His brain, always functioning with crystal clarity, refused to process this information. This wasn't just a mistake. It was an impossibility. He looked from the phone to his briefcase, which held the rest of the money from the same wad. The same bills he'd just handed to Seo-hyun. His own money. From his own, most secure safe. The thought that they could be counterfeit was so absurd that it evoked not anger, but cognitive dissonance. It was like doubting the solidity of the ground beneath your feet. He understood the scale of the disaster. This wasn't just a logistical glitch, it was a blow to his reputation, to the very foundation of his power. His word was his currency. And now Seo-hyun, one of his most powerful and dangerous partners, believed Miho had betrayed him, deceived him, made him look naive. In their world, such an insult could only be washed away with blood. But Miho wouldn't have it. Seo-hyun was a strategic asset. Their future joint projects promised fabulous profits and expanded influence. All of this now hung by a thread over a wad of colored paper. He brought the phone to his ear again. His fingers, usually so precise, struggled to dial the number. He needed to act quickly, firmly, demonstrate control of the situation, even if he didn't have any. Seo-hyun didn't answer right away. The beeps seemed to last forever. Speak. His voice was icy. There was no trace of the previous anger left in it, only a dangerous calm. Seo-hyun. Minho's voice was low and commanding, but without the usual imperiousness. There was a heavy certainty in it. What you said is impossible, absurd. I don't know what happened, but I didn't give you counterfeit money. It's out of the question. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Minho felt his partner weighing every word. I held them in my hands, Minho. The salesperson at the jewelry store will confirm they're fake. Then there was a mistake somewhere. Someone's terrible mistake. I demand an immediate meeting. Now, you come to me, or I'll come to you. We need to check everything, in person, eye to eye. He didn't ask, he demanded. But his demand wasn't a threat, but an urgent need. He was letting So-Yun know the situation was critical for both of them, and it needed to be resolved immediately. Where? So-Yun asked curtly. His tone softened half a tone. Reason prevailed over his anger. He, too, understood the value of their alliance. On neutral territory, the warehouse at 5th Pier, in 20 minutes. Bring this money, I'll bring mine. We'll check everything. He didn't wait for an answer. He hung up. His mind had already shifted from shock to analysis and action. He gave the driver a short order, then dialed his technician, the man responsible for security and, among other things, checking the authenticity of the bills. Kim, he said when the phone on the other end picked up, get to the warehouse on 5th Plosh Chednaya immediately. Bring everything you need to check the cash. A full arsenal. I'll meet you in 15 minutes. The car sped through the night streets. Minho looked out the window but didn't see the city. He saw the inside of his safe, those neat stacks. He mentally went through everyone who had access to it. There were 2 of them. Him and Ji-Yu, no one else. Absolutely no one. He was the first to arrive at the warehouse. It was a vast, empty space, smelling of concrete and machine oil. A lone table and a few chairs stood in the center, illuminated by a single, powerful lamp. A few minutes later, Kim appeared, a thin, focused man with a large briefcase in his hand. He nodded silently to his boss and opened the briefcase on the table. Inside lay ultraviolet lamps, powerful magnifying glasses, and electronic detectors. Seo-Hyun arrived. He entered alone, his face a stony mask. In his hand, he clutched the ill-fated envelope. He silently tossed it on the table. Check it. Kim, without looking at his bosses, took the envelope. He worked quickly, methodically. He turned on the ultraviolet lamp. Under its light, several bills in the stack failed to reveal their security fibers. He took a magnifying glass and examined the watermarks. They were either absent or crudely executed. Unclear. He traced the surface of the bills with a special marker. The stripe remained dark, whereas on genuine money, it should have yellowed. Finally, he ran several bills through an electronic detector. A sharp, piercing beep emitted. Kim raised his head. His face was pale. Boss, they're fake. High quality, but fake. The paper is close, but not the same. The microprint is missing. The watermarks are fake. The air in the warehouse thickened. Minho walked up to the table. He picked up one of the bills. It seemed almost real. Almost. But now that he knew, he could feel the difference. The paper was a little smoother, the ink not as bright. He scooped up the entire stack and stuffed it into his jacket pocket. His face was expressionless. I don't know how this happened, he said, looking straight at So-Hyun. His voice was quiet, but every word was on target. But it's my responsibility, my mistake, and I'm fixing it. He turned to his suitcase, which Kim had brought. It held his emergency reserve, large bills he always kept with him in case of emergency, which he personally checked many times. He counted out the exact amount Seo-Hyun was supposed to receive. Real, crisp, flawless money. He placed it in a new clean envelope and handed it to his partner. Our agreement still stands. My apologies for this incident. I'll look into it. Seo-Hyun took the envelope. He didn't check it. He looked at Minho. He saw neither deception nor mockery, but a cold, merciless rage directed inward, and an iron determination to make things right. It was a language he understood. Actions, not words. Seo-Hyun nodded. His own anger subsided, replaced by understanding. Something serious had happened, something that had affected Minho himself. And now he would look for the culprit. Seo-Hyun almost felt sorry for the man. I accept your apology. Resolve the matter. And keep me updated. He turned and left, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty room. Minho remained standing at the table, staring into space. He dismissed Kim with a silent gesture. He was alone. Absolutely alone. And in this silence, his mind began its work. He returned to his office, mentally, step by step. He walked through the reception area, his office, the safe. Access was key. Just him and GU. He mentally reviewed the last weeks, months, his assistant. Flawless, efficient, irreplaceable GU. She never gave him any reason to doubt, not one. But now, under the magnifying glass of crisis, details began to emerge with alarming clarity. Her behavior lately, a slight aloofness, an overly perfect performance of her duties. He remembered the few times he'd caught her at the safe, straightening something out, organizing it. She always found an explanation. Just tidying up, boss. He nodded, pleased with her diligence. He thought about the system. Money came into the safe in large sums. He put it there himself. It lay untouched for weeks. He took out wads for operating expenses, and he never, not once, checked it. Why? It was his safe, his fortress. And then it dawned on him. Substitution. This couldn't be a one-time thing. It had to be a process, gradual, stack after stack, so he wouldn't notice. So he'd open the safe and see the usual amount of money and suspect nothing. This required time and access. Regular access, access that would arouse no one's suspicion. And the final, most important piece of the puzzle fell into place with a deafening silence. Today. Exactly today, GU wasn't at work. She called in sick, said she was ill. The very day he'd made a major deal with Seo-hyun, the very day the fakes came to light, it wasn't a coincidence. In his world, coincidences didn't exist. It was calculation. Cold, ruthless, perfect calculation. He stood next to the empty warehouse, and all the pieces of the puzzle came together to form one clear, irrefutable picture. There was only one traitor, the one he trusted implicitly, his shadow, his right hand. GU. She wasn't sick. She ran, with his money. Slowly, with difficulty, pulling himself out of his deep analysis, he reached his car. He climbed into the back seat. His face in the streetlights was like a stone mask. Not a shadow of doubt. Only cold, absolute certainty. He took out his phone. He dialed his top security officer, the man in charge of security operations. It's me. His voice was low and even, without a trace of emotion. Listen carefully. Find Gia. Now, I need her address. Every known address. Check everything. And find her. Now. She's probably packing her things and trying to escape. I want her here. Alive. Understood? He hung up. The car pulled away, taking him back to his office, into the eye of the storm his own trust had unleashed. The hunt was on. Miho didn't wait long. His people worked quickly and efficiently. They started with the employee database. They found GU's address, which she had listed in her job application. It wasn't a luxury apartment, but a modest dwelling in a residential area. This immediately struck them as odd, but they chalked it up to caution. They arrived there in 2 cars. 4 men in formal suits. They didn't ring the doorbell or knock. One of them, a burglar expert, quickly picked the lock. The door swung silently open. They walked inside. The apartment was quiet and clean. Nothing out of place. No signs of haste or packing. This alarmed them. They expected to see chaos, suitcases packed. But here it was calm. They walked into the living room and then into the kitchen. And there they saw her. The girl sat at the kitchen table. A cup of tea stood in front of her. A neat slice of cake lay on a plate. She was reading a book. She looked up at them. There was no fear on her face. Only surprise and slight irritation at the fact that strangers had broken into her home. She looked exactly like Jayu. Same haircut, same features, same voice. What does this mean? She asked, putting the book down. Who are you? What do you want? The guards exchanged glances. They were sure they'd found the traitor. The same GU who'd stolen the boss's money was sitting there, calmly drinking tea, as if nothing had happened. Her composure angered them. They looked at her with hatred and contempt. Traitor. Thief. Get up, the group leader ordered. His voice was harsh. You're coming with us. The girl pushed the cup away. Her movements were calm, but inside she was starting to panic. Explain what's going on. What right do you have to break into my house? I'm not moving until you identify yourself and show me your papers. The guards didn't waste time talking. 2 of them approached her, grabbed her by the arms, and lifted her from the chair. She tried to break free, but they held her tightly. Leave me alone. What do you want? I don't understand anything. This is a mistake. Her words sounded sincere, too sincere, but they chalked it up to good acting. They were sure she was lying. She was led to the car and seated in the back seat between 2 guards. She remained silent the entire journey, staring out the window. She tried to understand what was happening. Who were these people? What did they want? She wasn't involved in anything bad. She led an ordinary life. She worked as an accountant in a small firm. No connections to the Mafia, no problems with the law. The only odd thing in her life was her twin sister, Jiyu. They weren't close. Jiyu always yearned for something more, for money, for power. Their paths had diverged long ago. They rarely saw each other. The last time they spoke was a couple of weeks ago, and that meeting was brief and meaningless. The car stopped at an unfamiliar building. She was let out and escorted inside, through corridors, into an elevator, and finally into a large, austere office. There, behind a massive desk, sat a man. His face was cold and motionless. He looked at her with a gaze that made her blood run cold. The office was completely silent. Minho looked at Gia, at the one he thought was Gia. He had been waiting for this moment. He had been preparing for the conversation. He wanted to look betrayal in the eye, to see fear, to understand how she could have deceived him. But what he saw confused him. The girl stood before him, trying to hold herself upright. Her eyes held not the fear of guilt, but the fear of misunderstanding. And also dignity. The offended dignity of someone who had been undeservedly insulted. "So, Jiyu," Minho began quietly. His voice was soft, but there was a supreme danger in that softness. "Do you have something to tell me?" The girl looked at him in complete bewilderment. "Why do you call me Jiyu?" she asked. Her voice trembled. "My name is Ji-won." Minho frowned. He thought this was another trick. "Don't play with me. You know why you're here." Ji-won's voice was thick with tears. She fought them back. "I don't know who you are. I don't know why your people broke into my home and brought me here. I demand an explanation." She looked sincere. Too sincere. Minho felt his first doubt. Something was wrong. This girl didn't act like someone guilty, caught red-handed. She acted like someone innocent, caught in some terrible mistake. "You work for me," Minho said, watching her reaction carefully. "You're my assistant, and you stole a large sum of money from me." Ji-won's expression was one of complete and utter bewilderment. She even flinched. "What? Me? I work for you? I'm an accountant at a construction company. I've never seen you before, and I didn't steal any money. You've got me confused with someone else." And then it dawned on her. Suddenly, like lightning, her sister, Jiyu, the same Jiyu who was always surrounded by secrets, who had some strange, important job she didn't like to talk about. "Jiyu," Ji-won whispered, looking at Minho with wide eyes. "You're talking about my sister, about Jiyu. We're twins." Complete silence fell over the office. The guards standing by the door exchanged glances. They understood. They had made a huge mistake. Minho didn't move. He looked at Ji-won. And now he saw a difference. Small, but important. The expression in her eyes was different. More open, more naive. Her hairstyle was the same, but different in detail. This girl was different. "Your sister," Minho said slowly. It wasn't a request, but a statement. "Yes," Ji-won exclaimed, feeling like she was finally being listened to. "My sister Jiyu. She works here, right? She did something? And you thought it was me? That's why everything is so weird. Oh my God, she didn't even warn me." She shook her head, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Her own sister had set her up, left her in such a terrible situation. Minho leaned back in his chair. All the pieces fell into place. Suddenly, completely. Jiyu, she had a twin sister, and she had used her. She knew that if they started looking for her, they would come to the address she had given when applying for the job. Her sister's address. She had framed her own sister to buy herself time to escape. It was a move cynical, ruthless, and brilliant in its cunning. All the rage, all the frustration he'd directed at this girl suddenly seemed irrelevant. Before him was no traitor. Before him was a victim of his anger and his assistant's treachery. He looked at his guards. They were looking at the floor. They were ashamed. They had broken into an innocent woman's house, frightened her, and brought her here by force. They had carried out their orders, but now they realized they had made a mistake. Minho looked at Ji-won. She stood there, trying not to cry. She was shaking from the stress she had experienced. I'm sorry, Minho said. Those words rarely left his lips. but now they were appropriate. We did make a mistake, a huge mistake. Jiwon took a deep breath, a mixture of relief and resentment. You could have just rung the doorbell and found out, she said quietly. Minho nodded. Yes, they could. But his world was no place for polite knocks. His world was one of broken doors and forceful methods. And now he saw where that led. Your sister, he began again. She stole a very large sum of money from me, and she disappeared. She used you as bait to detain us. Jiwon closed her eyes. She understood the depth of her sister's vileness. She hadn't simply stolen. She had thrown her to the wolves. I don't know where she is, Jiwon said honestly. We don't talk. I don't know anything about her life. I just want to go home. Minho looked at her. He knew he had to make amends, at least partially. He couldn't just let her go. He'd caused her too much trouble. Of course, he said. His voice softened a little. We'll take you right away. But first, do you have any problems? Financial, perhaps. I want to compensate for the stress you've caused. Jiwon shook her head. I don't need your money. I just want this to never happen again. But Minho was persistent. He nodded to one of the guards. He left and returned a minute later with a thick envelope. Minho handed it to Jiwon. Please, accept this as a token of my apology and as a guarantee that we will not bother you again. Your sister is responsible for her actions. You are not. Jiwon hesitated, but took the envelope. She knew there was no point in refusing. She just wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible. She was escorted to her car. This time, she was treated politely, almost courteously. She was driven home. The door to her apartment was already repaired. Alone, she opened the envelope. It contained a large sum of money, more than she earned in a year. She sat on a chair in her kitchen, next to an unfinished cup of tea, and looked at the money. She was happy it was all over, and she was glad that this money would solve some of her problems. But at the same time, she felt bitterness. Bitterness from her sister's betrayal, and fear at facing a world she had never even imagined. Meanwhile, Minho was giving new orders. Now, he knew the truth. And he knew Ji-yu was somewhere nearby. She couldn't have gotten far so fast. His men rushed to search again. But now they weren't looking for Ji-won. They were looking for the real one, Ji-yu. And they were even more motivated. They needed to correct their mistake and find the one who outplayed them all. Several weeks passed. Ji-won gradually returned to her normal life. At first, she was afraid to leave the house, checking the lock on the door every 5 minutes. She felt like she was being watched, that those men in suits would appear again at any moment. But the days passed, and nothing terrible happened. She deposited the money Minho had given her into a separate bank account. At first, she didn't even touch it. It sat there like a hot coal, a reminder of that terrible day. But then it came time to pay her younger brother's tuition. The sum was large, and her regular salary wasn't enough. She withdrew some of the money. The problem was solved quickly and easily. Then the washing machine broke. It was old and had been repaired several times. Jiwon simply bought a new good one without worrying about loans or installments. Then she was able to help her parents, who were in debt on their mortgage. She paid off their debt with a single transfer. With each step, her fear and resentment melted away. She was still angry at her sister. She had treated her terribly, vilely. But as a result, her life changed for the better. The financial pressure that had hung over her for years disappeared. She could breathe more freely. She began to allow herself small pleasures. A trip to a nice restaurant, a new dress, a trip to the sea. She even moved to a brighter, more spacious apartment in a safer neighborhood. Meanwhile, Minho's machine was churning nonstop. The humiliation of being duped by his own assistant and the mistake he made with her sister drove him to act with redoubled, no, tripled energy. His network was extensive. He had informants everywhere, at airports, train stations, ports, and among counterfeiters. The first few days yielded no results. Ji-yu seemed to have vanished. But Minho knew that wasn't possible. It was impossible to disappear completely. A trace always remains. You just had to find it. He changed tactics. He stopped looking for Gia. He started looking for the money. Such a large sum of cash was difficult to spend unnoticed. It needed to be laundered, exchanged, and invested. He ordered surveillance of everyone involved in large cash transactions in the city and beyond. He personally reviewed all reports. And then, 3 weeks later, the first signal arrived. A very expensive premium leather suitcase was sold at one of the upscale bag and luggage boutiques in the city's business district. The buyer paid in cash, in large bills. The seller was surprised, and following the instructions sent by Minho's people, he reported it. It was a thin thread, but it was enough. Minho ordered a check of all the nearby stores. Another salesperson from a jewelry boutique located in the same mall remembered a tall, stylish woman who had been interested in expensive gold bars. She also paid cash. She said she was going away for a long time and wanted to take something valuable and compact with her. It was her. Minho sensed it. Jiyu wasn't just hiding. She was preparing to escape. She was buying things for her new life. An expensive suitcase for her new, expensive outfits. Gold, the universal currency, difficult to trace. He gave orders to check every hotel, every apartment, every rental within a 5-kilometer radius of the shopping center. His men worked day and night. They showed a photo of Jia, the real one, from her corporate ID cards, to concierges, administrators, and doormen. And luck struck again. The manager of one of the luxury apartment hotels she was renting by the day recognized her. The girl had rented a room under a false name, but paid a deposit in large bills. She had been there for 4 days already. She said she was waiting for important documents before leaving for abroad. Minho didn't wait. He sent a capture team there, a quiet, professional one. They had one demand: take her alive. He needed to talk to her. In person. Jiyu emerged from the shower, wrapped in a soft terry cloth robe. She felt wonderful. Her plan had worked flawlessly. All the clues led to her naive sister. While Minho and his monkeys dealt with Jiwon, she had time to prepare everything. The new documents were ready. They were in the hotel safe. She was supposed to pick them up the next morning. And that evening, a private flight to another country. She had it all. Money, a new name, a new future. She went to the minibar and poured herself a glass of expensive champagne. She looked out at the city at night through the panoramic window of her room. This city, Minho, his organization, all that was in the past. She had outplayed them. She was smarter. She thought about her sister. For a moment, she felt a little uncomfortable. Jiwon certainly didn't deserve this. But what could she do? In this life, you have to be strong. You have to be able to make tough decisions. Jiwon was weak, she always had been, and the weak always lose. She took a sip of champagne. The taste of victory was sweet. She was already imagining her new life. A villa by the ocean. Servants. Freedom. She deserved it. Suddenly, she heard a soft click in the hallway, as if someone had very carefully inserted a key into a lock. She became wary. It couldn't be the service. She was hanging up the Do Not Disturb sign. She rushed to the table where the pistol lay in a drawer, purchased at the secret market with part of Minho's money. But she didn't make it. The door to the room opened silently. 3 men in dark, discreet clothing stood in the doorway, their faces covered by balaclavas. They entered quickly, like shadows, and closed the door just as silently behind them. Jiyu froze, glass in hand. Her heart pounded. She stared at them, unable to move. These weren't police. The style was different. More brutal, more professional. The eldest of the group, a tall man, stepped forward. His eyes, through the slits in his balaclava, were cold as ice. Jiyu, he said. Her name sounded like a death sentence. She tried to pretend she didn't understand. Who are you? What do you want? You've got the wrong number. The man shook his head slowly. He pulled a photograph from his pocket. Her photo from the pass. We weren't mistaken. The boss wants to talk to you. About money. About your sister. About a lot of things. He nodded to one of his men. He quickly snatched the glass from her hand. Champagne spilled onto the expensive carpet. The second man grabbed her arms and twisted them behind her back with a plastic tie. It took less than 10 seconds. She didn't scream. Screaming was useless. She looked at them with hatred. Her plan, her escape, her new life. It all collapsed in an instant. Where is the money? Asked the elder, looking into her eyes. She remained silent, her lips pressed together. He glanced around the room. His gaze fell on a new, expensive leather suitcase standing by the bed. It was packed. A purse lay nearby, and the edge of a wad of cash peeked out from it. The very same cash she hadn't had time to exchange. The man walked up to the suitcase and kicked it. It fell heavily onto its side. Beautiful, he said indifferently. Too bad you won't be needing it now. Those words finished her off. All her confidence, all her grandeur evaporated. Her shoulders slumped. She understood. It was over. She was quickly and professionally escorted out of the room through the service entrance. No one saw them. The car was waiting downstairs. They placed her in the back seat and covered her head with a bag. She drove in complete darkness. She didn't know where they were taking her. But she knew who she was going to Minho. And she knew his mercy had run out. He'd given her one chance, trust, and she'd used it to betray him. Now it was his turn, and she knew he wouldn't stand on ceremony. That suitcase she'd bought for her luxurious life would truly be of no use to her. Her future was different now, very short and very dark. Gia was brought to the same building where Minho's office was. But this time, she wasn't taken to his office, but downstairs, to the basement. It was an empty, windowless room. Concrete walls, floor, ceiling, just one chair and a table. They tied her to a chair. The guards left. She was left alone in complete silence. About 20 minutes passed. She heard only her own breathing and the beating of her heart. The door opened. Minho walked in. He was alone. He walked over to the table and sat on its edge, crossing his arms. He looked at her silently. His face was calm, too calm. "Where's the rest of the money?" he asked. His voice was even, emotionless. Jiyu looked at him defiantly. "There aren't any. I spent it all. On a suitcase, on a hotel, on new documents." Minho shook his head slowly. "Don't lie. You couldn't have spent it all that quickly. You're smarter than that. You put it away. A reliable person, a safe deposit box, a rented warehouse. Where?" She pressed her lips together. Silence. Minho sighed. He stepped closer to her. "You know, Jiyu, it's not that you stole that offended me. It's that you think I'm stupid. You used your sister. Your blood, it's low, even for our world." "She's weak," Jiyu hissed. "She doesn't understand anything about life. She got her money. She should be grateful to me." Minho looked at her with disgust. "You really think so? You ruined her life. Now she's afraid of her own shadow. And you call that gratitude?" He stepped back toward the table. "Okay. You want to play the silent game? Fine. I have time. But first, answer one question. Why? You had everything. Trust, power, money." Jiyu laughed, dryly, joylessly. "That's it? I was your shadow, your servant. I did all the work, and the glory and power were yours. I deserved more. I wanted to be in your place." "You could never be in my place," Minho retorted coldly. "You lack one thing, respect for others and for yourself. You're just a greedy and stupid woman." Her eyes flashed with hatred. Minho took out his phone and sent a message. A minute later, 2 of his men entered the room. "She won't cooperate," Minho said. "Find out where the money is. Use all available means. Just don't get rid of her. I want her to see everything." He turned and walked towards the door. Gia called after him. For the first time, fear appeared in her voice. "What are you going to do?" Minho stopped at the door without turning around. "I'll give you my money back, and then I'll send you to Seo-hyun. As an apology. I think he has his own ideas on what to do with you." He left. The door closed. Jiyu was left with 2 men. She looked at their stony faces and realized that the game was truly lost. Definitely. Her scream was drowned out by the sound of the toolbox opening. Jiyu stared at the toolbox. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She tried to remain calm, but fear paralyzed her. The older man took a pair of pliers from a drawer. He placed them on the table. The sound of metal on wood was loud in the quiet room. "For the last time," he said calmly. "Where is the money?" Jiyu remained silent. She hoped her silence would save her. She thought they wouldn't dare take any serious measures. She still believed in her luck. The man nodded to his partner. He approached Jiyu and held her hand tightly. The older man picked up the pliers. "Are you right-handed, Jiyu?" he asked calmly. "You need whole fingers to work with documents." Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected such a quick transition to action. She tried to break free, but they held her tightly. "Wait," she cried. I'll tell you." Her breathing was ragged. Her plan was crumbling before her eyes. She knew no amount of money was worth her life, but her greed was still strong. They They're in the storage room, at the central station, she breathed out. The key is in my jacket pocket. The older man didn't believe her. He'd seen her like that many times. They always lie at first. What's the cell number? He asked, holding the pliers to her little finger. 34, cell 34, she said quickly. Password 7781. He lowered the instrument and looked at her inquiringly. If you're lying, we'll come back, and then we won't start with the fingers. Understood? She nodded, trying to hold back her tears. The humiliation was worse than the pain. The man left the room to verify the information. His partner remained to guard Gia. 20 minutes passed. She sat staring at the floor, knowing she had lost. The door opened. The man returned. He was holding 2 large sports bags. He placed them on the table. Everything is in place, he said to his partner. She wasn't lying. He turned to Jiyu. You're lucky, just once. They left her alone in the room. She sat tied to a chair and pondered her fate. She knew what would happen next. Miho would never forgive her betrayal. An hour later, the door opened again. Miho walked in. He looked at the bags of money, then at Gia. Everything's back to normal, he said. Except one thing, my trust in you. She was silent. What could she say? Now the question of your punishment, he continued. So-hyun wants to meet you, in person. Jiyu paled. She knew what this meant. Seo-hyun was no less cruel than Miho, maybe even more so. No, please, she whispered. I got the money back. I got everything back. That doesn't make up for it, Miho replied coldly. You betrayed me. You deceived Seo-hyun. You framed your own sister. Everything has a price to pay. He turned towards the exit. Get her ready for dispatch, he told the guards. She should be with So-hyun in an hour. The door closed. Jiyu remained sitting in the room. Now her fate was sealed. Her dreams of a rich life abroad vanished into thin air. Only pain and humiliation lay ahead. The guards came in to untie her from the chair. She didn't resist. Her will was broken. They led her to a black van and put her inside. The doors closed with a dull thud. The van pulled away. Jiyu sat on the cold metal floor and stared into space. She thought about her sister, about Ji-won. She was now living a quiet life with the money she'd earned. And she, Jiyu, had lost it all. She realized her mistake too late. Greed and the desire for power blinded her. She overestimated her own strength and underestimated Miho. The van stopped. The doors opened. Before her was another entrance, another elevator, another room, and another person waiting for her. Seo-hyun sat in a chair, smoking a cigar. He looked silently at Jija as she was led into the room. His gaze was heavy and merciless. So here she is, he said quietly. The very woman who dared to deceive me. Jiyu stood with her head down, afraid to look him in the eyes. I have a proposition, So-hyun said. You'll work for me. Give me everything you have. And follow my every command. It's your only chance to survive. She slowly looked up at him. There was no hope in her gaze, only emptiness. Okay, she whispered. I agree. She understood that this wasn't salvation. It was simply the exchange of one cell for another. But now she had no choice. Her life was no longer her own. Seo-hyun smiled. A cold, joyless smile. Let's start today. I already have a task for you. Jiyu nodded. Her dreams of freedom and wealth were over. Now the life of a servant awaited her. A servant of her own greed and ambition. Meanwhile, Miho was in his office checking the money. Everything was in place. He closed the safe and sat down at his desk. The case was closed. The traitor was punished. The money was returned. He looked at his former assistant's empty desk. He felt not anger, but disappointment. He'd given her a chance, and she hadn't appreciated it. He picked up the phone and dialed the number. Find me a new assistant, he said. Conduct a full background check, this time with cameras in the office. He hung up. Life went on. The lesson had been learned. Trust is a luxury one shouldn't indulge in too often. 3 months passed. Gia was behind bars. She was sentenced to 5 years for fraud and using counterfeit money. The court took into account her cooperation with the investigation. The new life was hard but predictable. Rise at 6 in the morning, breakfast, work in the so-called workshop. She sewed uniforms. The monotonous work was calming. Sometimes she thought about her past life, about the money she stole, about Minho, about her sister. These thoughts were painful, but they helped her understand her mistakes. Jiwon never visited her. Jiyu wasn't surprised. She was the one who ruined their relationship. Jiyu learned to be inconspicuous. She didn't seek friendship or engage in conflict. She worked and read books from the library. For the first time in a long time, she had time to think. One day, a new prisoner was moved into her cell. A young woman convicted of theft. She cried all night long. "Calm down," Jiyu said. "Crying won't help." The girl looked at her hopefully. "How do you survive here?" "Work. Listen to the rules. Don't stand out." Jiyu said this without emotion. "And don't trust anyone." She realized these rules would have been useful to her in a past life. But then she ignored them. A month later, Jia was transferred to a less restrictive facility. There were educational programs there. She enrolled in accounting courses. Her teacher, an elderly woman, immediately noticed her abilities. "You have a good head for numbers. Why are you here?" Jiyu didn't lie. "Greed, stupidity, ingratitude." The teacher nodded. "Awareness is the first step to correction." Jiyu studied diligently. She passed her exams at the top of her class. She was offered a job in the accounting department. Now she kept track of the finances. The irony of fate didn't escape her. She was working with numbers and money again. But this time, honestly. Meanwhile, Minho was expanding his business. He bought the very same construction project he had negotiated with Seo Hyun. The deal was a success. His new assistant, a young man named Taemin, proved to be a quick learner. He was careful, attentive, and never asked unnecessary questions. The perfect employee. One day, Minho was checking the financial reports and found a small error. Taemin corrected it immediately. "I'm sorry, boss. It won't happen again." Minho nodded. He appreciated that attitude, but now he always double-checked everything himself. Trust had to be earned through hard work. He occasionally received reports about Jiyu. He knew she was studying and working. He didn't care. She was part of the past. One day, Jiwon called him. "I want to give you some of the money back. The money you gave me." "Why?" Minho was surprised. "I found a good job. I don't need this money. It reminds me of the bad." Minho thought, "Leave them. Consider them compensation. And as a reminder that even the most reliable can fail." He hung up. Jiwon was a good person. Unlike her sister, 2 years passed. Jia was released on parole for good behavior. She got out, served her time behind bars, and now has an accounting degree and some savings. She rented a small room in an inexpensive area and found a job in a small accounting firm. The salary was modest but fair. Sometimes she passed by Minho's former office, but she never went inside. The past was the past. One day at a cafe, she accidentally met Jiwon. The sisters looked at each other in silence. Jiyu said quietly. Jiwon nodded. "I'm glad you're okay." They went their separate ways. Reconciliation was impossible, but the resentment no longer burned. Jiyu continued working. She became a skilled professional. Clients appreciated her precision and attention to detail. One day, a new client came to their firm. A businessman who wanted to open his own restaurant was looking for an accountant. "I hear you're the best in town," he told Jia. She smiled. "I'm just doing my job." Honestly, for the first time in years, these words didn't grate on her ears. She had finally found her path. Without deception, without betrayal, without chasing other people's money. And Minho was sitting in his office one evening, looking out over the city. His business was growing. Everything was under control. He opened the safe, counted the money, closed it. Everything was in its place. He left the office. His car was waiting for him. Life went on. Everyone has their own path and their own price for mistakes. 2 years passed. Jiu stood in front of the mirror in her modest but cozy apartment. She wore a simple dark suit, her hair pulled back into a strict hairstyle. Over the years, she had built a new life. She worked as an accountant for a reputable company, leading a quiet, measured life. But one thought haunted her all these years. The thought of what she had done to Minho. Not about the money, that had long been returned, but about the trust, about the human attitude he had once shown her. She'd prepared for this day for a long time. She'd saved up to buy a decent suit. She'd practiced in front of the mirror, choosing the right words. She didn't want to ask for anything, just say what needed to be said. She arrived at his office early in the morning. The new secretary, a young woman, politely inquired about the purpose of her visit. "Tell them Gia is here," she asked. "I'll wait." Half an hour passed. Finally, the secretary invited her into the office. Minho sat at his desk. He looked almost unchanged, still stern and collected. His gaze was attentive but neutral. "Sit down," he pointed to a chair in front of the table. Ji-yu sat up, placing her purse on her lap. Her hands were cold, but she held herself straight. "I didn't come here for work," she began, "and I didn't come to ask for anything." Minho nodded silently, letting her continue. "I came to apologize." Her voice wavered, but she pulled herself together. "Really, without hidden intentions? Without hope of forgiveness?" She paused, collecting her thoughts. "You trusted me. You trusted me with more than just money. You trusted me with your plans, your thoughts, and I used that against you. I betrayed your trust in the most vile way." She looked him straight in the eyes without looking away. "Now, years later, I understand how painful it is when someone trusts you and you betray them. When your faith in you is used against you. It took me a long time to realize this." Minho listened silently, his face remaining impassive. "I'm not justifying myself. Not at all. I just want you to know that I've realized my mistake. I've realized that there's no excuse for what I did. And I'm truly sorry. Sorry for the pain I caused. Sorry for the trust I destroyed." She stood up, still looking at him. "I'm leaving, and I'll never bother you again. But I wanted to say this in person. Just like a human being." She turned and walked toward the door, her hand already on the handle when he finally spoke. "Ji-yu?" She stopped but did not turn around. "Thank you for coming." His voice was quiet but clear. "It took courage." She nodded and left the office. As she rode down the elevator, she felt an incredible sense of relief. Not because she'd hoped for anything, but because she'd done what she had to do. The past couldn't be undone, but she could admit her mistake. It was simply human. Minho sat at his desk for a long time, staring into space. For the first time in years, the stony mask on his face cracked. Maybe people really are capable of change. Maybe sincere repentance is worth more than any revenge. He slowly shook his head and picked up the papers again. But something within him had shifted.